right. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here. Um, I am Debbie Rosen, and this is Lindsay Toms, and we're super excited about the webinar tonight. It is a new thing that we're doing based on a lot of popular demand. Everybody had been asking us to do something like this, so we're super excited to do it. And, we're interested in hearing a little bit from you in terms of what you were looking for when you came. And so we're going to get to that. But what we really wanted to cover was to answer any questions that you might have in terms of what is a study skills system really? And if this year maybe didn't go as well as you had hoped that it might, or if there's some kind of skills that you believe may be missing or underdeveloped in your student, how does this fit in maybe with some of the other things that you've tried or the other things that you might be doing with the Study Pro? Because I know there's a lot of Study Pro parents out here. And so that's really what we're going to cover this evening. So many of you know us, and maybe some of your students have actually sat into this in the Homework Center, but for those of you who don't, we are an executive function and study skills center. And so while we talk a lot about the things that we do, what's most important for us in terms of outcome are really ensuring that students build lifelong skills. And more importantly, one of the themes you're going to hear from us this evening is it's really not just about tips and tricks. It's really about helping guide students to reflection on what makes things hard for them. And then how can they how can we help them introduce strategies that make things easier for them? And we do believe that, as I said, that these are lifelong skills that will really be helpful for them beyond just school. So one of your first questions might be, who can take these study skills courses and what do you really offer? So we do have a number of courses, but from a study skills perspective, we offer the courses for fourth, fifth, sixth through eighth, ninth through 12th in college. We also have a workshop called AI to Improve Executive Functions. And so we're going to cover some of that later on in the presentation tonight. We do offer that also for parents. So for high schoolers, we offer the course for the students. It's a workshop. It's a one-time 3-hour workshop. But for everybody else, we offer it for the parents because we feel that middle schoolers are just a little bit too maybe not ready for putting the power of AI in their hand and making some of the decisions, like not to hit the easy button. So we just want to make sure that we're sharing the skills with parents. The course itself that we're going to be talking about tonight, the study skills course, is like a 5-session course. During the school year, we offer it on Sundays for 2 hours. And then during the summer, we offer it every week, Monday through Friday. So it's either 10 to 12, 1 to 3, or 4 to 6. And you pick 1 week. So it's not something that goes on all summer. It's something that goes on just 1 week of the summer. And so before we start, we were wondering if any of you might be able to put in the chat, what motivated you to come here? What are the ages of your kids? Do you have any specific questions? We would just love to hear from you. I know one of the objections, if you wanted to put that in the chat, we'd really appreciate it. I know that one of the objections that we tend to hear is that my kid doesn't want to come. And so we're going to be talking about that. Sometimes we get asked about one-to-one versus group. And so we sometimes get asked, we'll talk a little bit about that too. And at the end, we do have a Q&A. And so if you do have any specific questions, we'd love to hear those in the chat, but we'll just kind of leave that open in case those come along the way, and we'll try to answer them as we see them coming in. But one of the things that you may have said to yourself is that, boy, my student is really, really smart and they're getting by, but at what cost? And they may be having trouble starting or planning or following through. Or they may have really done well up until a certain point and doesn't really have a full command on how to study. And a lot of times I also hear, boy, my student's doing well now, but they're going into middle school, going into high school, going into college. I really need them to be prepared when, the curriculum gets much more aggressive and more complex. And so I'm going to talk for a second a little bit about, how did we get here in the first place? So what we know is that when kids are in elementary school, they're really taught, what to do. They have this red folder, as you see here on the left-hand side. They usually have their math, their social studies, maybe their vocabulary. They have to read something. They have to answer, 10 vocabulary words. And when they're done, they put it on the right. And so we know that it's done because it's pretty easy to manage. And I think the scorecard is really how smart am I? Like if I get it all done, if I get the answers right, then, I'm really smart. I pick it up really easily. Maybe I don't have to put that much effort in. And in some ways, that's the system. And then what happens is that as we get into the later years, it it's struggles because we struggle because now all of a sudden the emphasis has shifted less from just completing the content and more about figuring out what the content is, what it's asking me to do, how do I prioritize it all, how do I plan. So I might have a lot of different teachers and I have multiple assignments, but no one really tells anybody that this is what's happened, that it's not just about doing the work anymore, but it's sometimes about previewing what's coming up. It's about doing all of the work and figuring out what it is, but then about reviewing it in kind of a specific way that really makes it stick. And so this is really how we get here. And we often say that it's really a shift from the concept of content only to process. So we're moving from the content centric world to a process centric world. I can have the smartest kid in the world, but if they didn't know there was a math test or they can't manage all of the work or they wait till the last minute to do the paper, then that's a challenge for them. It doesn't reflect their true intellect. The other thing we wanted to share was that, as it says here, we invest hours in coaching sports, music, and other skills, but almost no time explicitly teaching the skills students use every single day. And, we know that a lot of times students will say, I don't want to go and get this additional help. I don't want to be taught the skills to move from a content centric world to a process centric world. And we sometimes can be like, oh, they have to really want it. We really are, we really don't, we really want them to lead and they won't get anything out of it if they don't want it. But at the same time, I know that if, like your kid said, oh, we don't want to go to swim practice or we're not going to go to this prep for this big game, we may not say, oh, it's okay. We just have to let them make their decision. Now, we're not suggesting that we know a better way to parent. It's just that what's so critical every day is, how do we help our kids prioritize things that we know are really important for them? And so that's what we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about today. So let's step back and talk for a minute about why a study skills system matters and why it's not just a bunch of tips. Sometimes we do hear from parents, boy, we would just love to give some tips to my kid. And the reason we created this course is because there's actually a learning cycle that happens every single day of every single school day, every single schooling year that students are experiencing. The teacher teaches, they assign work, and they assess and they test. So what happens is that my children and your children, they go to school every day and they're kind of dragged along in this process. And they think, oh my gosh, I just have to keep up. And we're feeling some of this at home when our kids are having trouble getting started. Maybe they have ADHD or maybe they have some learning differences. And we go, how are they supposed to be keeping up with this process? And what we start to see is that, what we don't know or what we don't see, excuse me, is what the student's role is in this process. No one really says to our student, hey, Joey or Johnny or Lisa, when the teacher is teaching, your role is to actively receive information. When the teacher is assigning work, your job is to retain that information and to try to do your best to really practice the information. So when it comes time for the teacher to assess and take the test, it's easier for you to recall. And really, I don't know that students know how to do that, or even we as parents know exactly how to teach our kids to do that. And so what happens is that because they're not really aware of this whole process, there's a bunch of friction that gets introduced. And this is what we see every day at the Study Pro. Oh, my student doesn't want to write anything down. They're very having a hard time getting started. I was speaking to somebody today. It's like they know they get distracted in the basement. And so they go to the room and they get distracted in their room. Or they open up this assignment and they feel overwhelmed and they just shut down. Um, they may reread things. They don't know how to take notes. My kids, my siblings are there. The dogs are there. Everything, right? This is a distracting environment. So this is a lot of what slows students down, but it's not been presented in this way, and they really haven't had a chance to reflect on that friction. And so what we did was we built a study skills system, a course with that as the roadmap, helping students to better reflect on the friction that they are experiencing. Not everybody's is the same. Some people can get started easily but get distracted. Some people have a hard time planning, some people easier. Some kids just struggle with certain subjects versus others. And so the goal that we have for this course is to make sure that students understand how this all fits together and where they have the biggest stuck points, if you will, and what are the strategies that work for them and how they specifically work with them. And so that's really what Lindsay's going to talk about here in a second with some examples. So as I end my portion here, what I want to say is that it's really the system that makes it work. And what you see here right now is the arc of what we offer in the study skills course. So when you're asking yourself, boy, do they really need just the test, the note taking, or they only need, the planning piece? It's really that it all fits together. Because if somebody says, boy, my student struggles with test taking, it's not necessarily the taking of the test. It's not necessarily the studying. It could be all the way back to the note taking or the planning, the organizing, or the completing of the homework, because it all really fits together. And that's the piece that we want to share some examples of. And it's also the fact that what we know is that when kids don't have the skills, everything just gets harder. And we often use this analogy that when you're skiing and you're on the green hill, you think, oh my gosh, this is so easy. I'm the best skier ever. And then you move to the blue hill, which is, the analogy is kind of like middle school. And things get much harder, but you really do need different skills. And certainly when you get to the moguls, you can't be using all those skills that you use on the green hill when you are in the blacks. And so what we want, and what is unfair to students, is that we move them from the green to the blue and the black, and nobody really tells them that the terrain has changed. And that's really what the course is about, is to say, let's just reflect on what's hard about getting down these black hills and how can we make it easier for you. And the great news is that they take these skills for life. So I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay right now and pick up on anything else, and then just tell me when you want me to move forward.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I love the way you framed this slide, and really what this slide is asking or answering really is why or when does teaching study skills go wrong? And it goes wrong because it doesn't show the student, it doesn't help them see how the pieces fit together. And so they've heard some of this stuff before. The strategies you saw on the previous slide, like chunking out work, that's not something new necessarily. However, if they see chunking and planning before they've learned how to initiate or learn strategies to initiate, then that chunked plan isn't going to do anybody any good and any frustration, and it's going to cause frustration. And so that's where it's typically gone wrong. Whether it was well-meaning parents who were trying to help with some study skills or convincing why they needed this, or well-meaning teachers or tutors that were working on skills in isolation. Like this slide says, kind of a strategy without a system is really just a tip. And a tip is easily forgotten, and a tip is not going to be as useful to them as this system would be. So that goes into the next slide that really is showing why would this system really work for your kids potentially. One thing we've learned and what we know about any kind of learning is that it does need to be personalized. And this is a group class. We keep it low ratio, 10 students maximum. 8 on Zoom if we're going to do something remote, but we want to make it really personal and have them reflect. Because again, to build the right system, you need to have the right foundation, it needs to go in the right order, and that we need to have the right self-awareness. So this is not a one size fits all model in the sense that it is a group class and we have a curriculum, we have walked them through it. However, all throughout it is this personalization where we have them reflect on what their barriers are and then pick the strategies that's going to work for them based on what that specific barrier is. And because of that, it becomes really interactive. There's times where there's discussion, there's times when they're sharing out together. I see the relief come across everyone's faces after that first day, that first part of the first day, when they get to share and they think, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who has trouble with time management because I tell myself I'll do it later. Oh, that kind of discussion really helps make it interactive. But then they also get to practice strategies. There's something completely different about hearing how to chunk or what to do to chunk something versus I'm going to show you something, you're going to feel overwhelmed, and I'm going to show you what you're going to do with this feeling of overwhelm and how to turn that into a chunk plan. We actually take them through that process and they can actually do it, physically do it. And that's then finally the culmination of what makes it useful is because they've found the relief that eliminates the real struggle and it's finding the right strategy for that struggle that makes it really useful. So we're going to show just a little bit of how we start to build that self-awareness and help with that reflection is on the first day, the students all take this self-assessment where they're kind of noticing maybe oftentimes for the first time what some of their strengths and what some of their lesser strengths, what some of their needs are when it comes to executive function, which are the skills you need to do your study skills, and their study skills, like their note-taking skills. What strengths do they already have? This already helps them start to leverage some of those strengths, help them notice where they need to maybe prioritize some of their strategies. And instead of what that changes and flips the narrative, instead of us as parents or adults in their lives trying to convince them, hey, this is what you're gonna need. I think it's very, very common that when they're moving to a next stage, if they're going from middle to high school or elementary to middle, it's comes with this big warning, like you're going to need to be able to do this. The teachers are not going to do this for you when you get to this next stage. That doesn't necessarily feel so good. And I don't know about you all, but that doesn't necessarily going to empower me to then go fix it. It's going to make me maybe feel overwhelmed, embarrassed, ashamed, scared about the next step. Where this flips the narrative, where they're noticing about where their strengths are, and then they can get this report that helps them see some of the strengths and then see where they might want to prioritize as they take the next step. And so this is, if you go back, Debbie, I just wanted to not reveal this real quick. Go back and hopefully no one saw that, but and please do. I know we haven't gotten anything in the chat yet, but if we can potentially get something that will help you experience what the students experience when they take the class from us too, is let's talk about this initiation thing. What is the scary thing that you all might be procrastinating on, that you know that you have to do it, you haven't forgotten about it, but you're having trouble getting started on it for whatever reason? You don't even have to tell me the thing. You could tell me the emotion that you're feeling about it. It could be as simple as boredom, overwhelm, right? It could be stressed. It could be annoyed. Like, what's the thing that we're avoiding just because it's annoying? Like, it's just, yes. So you don't necessarily have to share the thing, but if you could share the emotion around the thing, I'm sure you're not alone in that. But as hopefully, Debbie, right? You don't even need to know the thing, but yeah, there might be a few things that we have. I know there's a few things on my list that could fall into that. But this is what we have them reflect on. But then on the next slide, what we see is what we have them, what's more important is to not necessarily notice the thing that I'm avoiding as much as noticing the why behind why I'm avoiding it. Like, what is the typical thing that might be my barrier? I might feel like it's going to take too long. I don't feel like it. I don't have the motivation. It's worth too little points. Like, oh gosh, it's going to take this much effort and then it's 5 points. I don't know. That might be what my barrier might be. But we have this reflection point Yeah, lack of time. I'm seeing some of the comments there, right? Limited, so stressful. That's one of my biggest triggers. If I don't feel like I have enough time to get it done in the window I have, then it becomes future Lindsay problem. It becomes, oh, I'll do that later. And that's exactly what's happening with our kids every day. So we first start with helping them realize and normalize that it starts with a barrier, and that's when we can find the right solution. So you see this little image here, and this is another image if anyone's familiar with the famous TED Talk, Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. He does a really, really entertaining way of describing procrastination and the panic monster. So if you yourselves or you have kids that work on assignments the last minute or projects at the last minute, it's because they're waiting for the panic monster that comes only when the due date is imminent, when there's a threat of embarrassment or some kind of consequence. So we show this kind of video to them to then help them realize, again, one, you're not alone. It's relatable, it's memorable, but then now let's actually help you with the solutions based on this. So this is where we would have them, based on the information and the reflection that we've done so far, let's apply a strategy that could bring the relief that you're actually looking for. So I think we have some examples on the next slide. We teach them how to do time blocking and help them notice. We connect it to how that might reduce overwhelm for some, if that's what they're noticing, if their feelings are stressed and feeling like I don't have enough time. A strategy like the work windows or a start routine might notice that I really just don't feel like it. I feel like my tank is empty. Then I might need to do some dopamine stacking kind of strategies. What could I pair this preferred task of starting my homework with something that I do prefer? So my start routine might look like I'm getting into my comfy clothes, I'm getting my favorite drink and moving it there. But why that connection between the barrier and then the strategy is really where the magic happens for the students. And then also, I'm just going to share two more about note taking and test taking. These are just a little bit of a glimpse into all the skills. But part of the note-taking process, which is, I will tell you very honestly, as a classroom teacher who was a public school teacher for many, many years, when we were writing this curriculum and we were going through this process, I thought this was going to be the least preferred day. The day that we were going to have kids write and take notes. From my experience as a teacher, I thought it was going to be the one that would be the hardest to teach and get the least buy-in. I was painfully wrong. It is the day that everything really does start to get really exciting for them. They've seen the previous 2 days about how we're connecting. There are real barriers to real strategies, that we're not just preaching at them. We're not just telling them you have to do it one way. They've gotten there. And now they get to note taking. And what we do is what you see in that step one is we have them take notes however they typically do. And then what they get to do is they have a reflection moment where they get to see both a test and a little checklist to help them grade, self-monitor their own notes. What did I notice about this? Gosh, and I get to hear from the kids. Wrote down all the details, but I missed all of the big picture stuff. Like I wrote down 1985 and I have no idea why I wrote down 1985 because there was no headings. Or I write too much because there was no abbreviations. I was writing in full sentences. I love when, especially this happens in like with high schoolers and some of the perfectionism, like really high achieving students who are performing really well, but they get to notice in this moment that they're writing and they're doing the first time that, and they're writing completely from A to B, and they ran out of time. So they get to have this experience and grade, reflect their own notes and see how useful they would be to study for a test. And then that's when they get to personalize the strategies. So not everybody is starting from zero. Some of them already have great strategies. Some are using annotations and headings and organization, but they might be noticing I'm missing some of the specifics from a reading, or I might be missing some specifics for when I'm in class, like hearing a lecture. And that's when we go through the rest of the day getting to personalize and practice their new system of note-taking, which depending on the student, it might be different kind of new to them. And then finally, how that all connects to test prep is they actually get to study for a test. And I joke that they're studying for a test that they're never going to take. And I'm always so proud. And we ask parents to come back on the 5th day to see all the hard work that they've done and hear from the instructor about what strategies they learned. And I'm always so proud to be able to share the amount of effort that the students put in to study for a test that they actually weren't going to take. And then, of course, the last time I taught this, one of the students said, I actually am taking psychology this year. I am taking, because that's the notes that they take. They read a passage and take notes on psychology and biology, neuroscience, really. And that he was like, this actually will help me in this coming school year. And I might have a test on this. But the point is that they actually get to have the experience and see the connection between taking notes helps you receive the information and retain it. Like, what about the way I organize my notes helps me retain it? And then how can I apply that to my study, my test prep? So we take them through, you see the anagram on the left, the camps. This is not something I'm going to try to teach you now, but we have a systematic way of teaching them the very effective proven ways of how to get it into their long-term memory and make it easier for retrieval. Because oftentimes we hear from a lot of parents, like, they're so smart, they're doing so well in all their classes, and then their tests aren't demonstrating what really they know. And so that's why we go through this whole process, and all they're connecting is because that's a symptom. If their performance on an exam or assessment isn't really matching what their capabilities are, that's a symptom that most likely is connected to these other two layers. So there's the note taking and help them receive, and then the test prep. And then we also go through test taking strategies and how all of those can connect to this one output of the performance on the test, the grade on the test. There's all these other skills that they get to learn through a course like this. And then we wanted to, before we shift over into our AI kind of workshop overview, we wanted to just share, we do after every class, we ask the kids to share some of their insights, and these were just too perfect to not share. So I won't read them all, but Debbie, please feel free to add and share.
No, I think what's important is that, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is that oftentimes people think, oh, my student is maybe not so excited about taking a study skills class, even if they're open to it, who wants to do that over the summer or even during the school year to add more. But I mean, honestly, I feel like there's such a relief in the end. I think we've all felt that way. We look at something like, oh, this is going to be so painful. It's even, hard to get up, sometimes on a plane to go on vacation. There are things that we find difficult, but at the end of the day, we have lists and lists of quotes about, we actually had like 2 or 3 quotes, and we just took in each box and we took them out, because what matters so much is that kids actually retain the information and they feel like they can name specific things that have been really helpful to them. I think, I'm not so alone. It was really interactive. It's really engaging. And so I think that's what makes us feel the proudest of that. So with that, what we're going to do, I'm just going to do a quick intro to what the relationship is between the study skills course, which is the 5-day, 10-hour, 2 hours a day study skills course that goes through everything that Lindsay just talked about, the base study skills system. But what we were also finding was that there was a lot of questions around AI and how can we use AI in a way that is useful and obviously not in a way that's harmful, and in a way that's ethical. And so we created last summer a very, very popular workshop that's a one-time workshop that you can take on its own, or certainly in conjunction, in addition to the study skills course, that really answers the question like, okay, now that I know that I need a plan, now that I get why I need a plan, now that I get why it might be harder for me to start, or even if I don't quite get that yet, how can I make it easier? Like, what is one way that I can make it easier, and how can AI help me do that? And so what we wanted to do was actually show you the actual course itself. And I'm going to unshare this for a second. I wanted to show you the actual course itself so that you could see what the kids actually use. So I'm going to share this. And so the idea is that it is actually really a course where we teach kids, um, all of these, and Lindsay will explain this, but really we teach them all of the types of challenges, we address all the types of challenges that she just talked about. So, how is it that it may make it easier to start, to understand, to prepare, to improve, to advocate? And we actually, they can actually put chats right here in the chat box and interactively use it so they can practice. So when Lindsay is sharing with you um, all of the different aspects of the workshop, it's really very interactive. They're all sitting here in front of their portals, and you can see, it moves through. And what you saw here before was that we do ask them questions in real time. What's the hardest part about starting? And then we have the data here. You'd be surprised to know that some of the things that they say that, okay, breaking tasks down might be the hardest thing starting, but it's really that they feel overwhelmed. So 71% of all the kids that have taken this workshop said that they feel overwhelmed, and that's what makes it so hard to start. So this is just an example um, this is actually the actual course. And so then I'm going to move back. Lindsay, is there anything else you want to share, or just
No, as you can stop sharing and switch back to the other slides, but as you're doing that, I just wanted to point out that that graph that you were showing is always such an insightful and really fun conversation to have with the kids, because every workshop attendee fills out one of those. So they get to see both their classmates' responses, but then every other classmate's response from the times before. And especially for that start barrier, as Debbie was saying, that one of the lowest one was this chunking out work. That, like, what's the barrier to getting started? And the lowest response was chunking out work. And that was really, really insightful information for me as an adult, because we as adults with executive function skills ourselves, we see chunking as the relief. We're like, oh, okay, so if you're having trouble getting started and you're feeling overwhelmed, then you chunk it out, and then all of a sudden you feel capable. But what we know is what I was saying earlier, is that a chunked plan, if I don't know how to get started, is still overwhelming. I need the strategies to initiate. I need some kind of on ramp to get me going. And that's what I love about the course too, is that again, it helps them feel like I am getting to really know myself. And now I can get to really know and apply the strategies that are going to work for me. And so this is kind of the piece that, we all understandably have some reservations and curiosities about AI and how it can be used with students or used in the hands of students. And the reality is it is here. And we do know that used in the right way, it can actually reward better thinking, and it can foster better thinking, and it can actually foster critical thinking, when I know that a lot of the concern is that it could actually eliminate it. But it will eliminate it if they're not actually taught how to use it. A phrase we keep saying often is, we made this mistake before with technology of giving students access to social media and smartphones and everything without really teaching them how to do that. Nobody's fault. We're all just trying the best we can. However, it was that reflection that I know I certainly had, is like, I'm going to try my best not to make that mistake again, is really say that this is a new piece of technology. This is a new world that they're going to be part of. Now we want to actually say, how are we going to actually use it appropriately, effectively? So how do we do that? We want to do the same kind of reflection that we do in the course. And that's what Debbie was saying. There is a connection here, a thorough thread of, we know skills get built between, if I can notice what my barrier is, then that is the first step. We don't want to jump straight to the solution. So what's getting in my way? I have an assignment. Noticing the barrier helps tell me what skill I need. And now how can I help AI not do it for me, but how can it help me problem solve and circumnavigate that barrier? So we're going to give you a couple examples, not everything, but of course, the barriers start, as many of you all know, if you've ever tried to sit down with your kids and figure out what they have to do, if you've ever gotten an email about missing work, if you've ever heard from them that, oh, yeah, I'm all caught up, I got it all done. And then you get the email, and then you try to go into Canvas or Schoology or whatever portal your students use. that feeling of overwhelm, of seeing a list. It's the teacher's responsibility to give due dates. They give a list of due dates of what they have to do. And the assumption then is now you know how to do it. You know how to organize it. You know how to prioritize it. You know how to actually get started on it, complete it, notice that you're completed, submit it on time. There's a lot of assumptions in between. I'm going to tell you what you have to do. Now you go do it. So let's think through some of those barriers. As we all know, what it could look like is getting started. And so I think, as Debbie, yeah, this is one specific example that I have this assignment, I have this project, it's for my history class. We ask the kids to share out what the barriers are. A lot of it is overwhelmed. How am I going to get this done? This is too much to do. It's going to take forever. I don't know how to pick how do I know what to basically start with and go in order? So what could this look like, but not having AI do the work? If I start with, a lot of the kids grew up with Google, so they are very used to even Google's AI now, but also just going to any kind of AI and putting something in and getting the output. And I've sat with kids and we'll show you what like kind of a basic output looks like on the next slide. So I might put this kind of prompt in, give me a list of steps or chunk this out, or what do I need to do here? Whatever the kind of basic prompt might be. And then they get out something like this. And then I've sat next to so many students when they're like, this isn't helpful. This is the same thing. I just want to quit. And I'm like, this is right there is the skill that works with critical thinking. And I'm like, no, this is what the beauty is about something like AI. Notice what you don't like about it. Tell me what you don't like about it. Why isn't it helpful? And then we're going to go back to the AI and we're going to tell it all those things. What don't you like about it? What isn't helpful? Just in that moment, they had to use their critical thinking. They had to use their own self-awareness. They got to actually learn something about themselves too. Like, I just don't like that it's all black and white. It's just, there's a lot of bolding. Okay, we can tell it that. So then we go through what can make prompts more effective, but also foster their critical thinking. These power moves are what they can add to a basic prompt. I always say it doesn't hurt to start with something basic and then respond to whatever you don't like about it. But we really want to teach them these skills and how to prompt engineer to get the output that they need and they want. So using that same example, on the next slide, we have act as what? What's the expert? Project planner, color coded, weekly. Now, this is my favorite part. I'll show my favorite part of AI is that I can add it context specific to me. I can give it my messy life. I can give it my messy brain dump. I can give it all of that context and it can do something with that. So I love the addition. Like if you went to Google and said, I had soccer at Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. 10 years ago, you would get zero responses back. But now with AI, you can give it all this context. And then if you see on the next slide is what output you get. And what's fun about the workshop is they actually get to do this for themselves. They get to add their own different prompt changes. They get to add their own different specifics. And then they get to notice what made it better. Like, what do you like about this? And then for this student, they really liked the color coding. It was easy to see. They liked that there was a checkbox. That's the difference by having it act like a project planner. And then I have to share a little personal story this morning about my friend was saying how they were using AI to redesign their front yard and their garden of their house. And she's like, I'm so excited, but I'm feeling even overwhelmed by this. And I was like, ask it to act like a budget conscious, but the most organized and efficient contractor that is out there and have it act as that expert to help you prioritize it. She was like, I would have never thought of that. And that's what we want to start helping kids as they're working on these assignments. They're also working on these skills that they're going to need one day for jobs in their lives one day is how do I critically think about my problem and apply the right solution to it? And then we just want to show off just a few of the other tools that they get to learn about because it's not just about like one size fits all model. And there's a lot of AI out there. It's changing and updating and getting exciting every day. We can't leave you without just knowing about Notebook.LM. Just if you were going to go to it tonight and you were just going to show your kid one thing, go to Notebook LM. It is free with a 18 plus Gmail account. But what you can do is upload whatever materials you want to be using and then generate what you see this studio on the right. You can generate a really realistic sounding podcast that you can interrupt and ask it questions. So you can ask for further information if you're listening to could you imagine listening to a podcast and getting confused when they start using terminology that you don't really understand and being able to be like, can you explain that concept to me again? Or can you break down that and explain it to me like a 5-year-old? Like that would be so invaluable. But that's what they can do with a tool like this. I used it today with a student who was studying for chemistry. He learns better visually. He started by saying, I just need to put all my effort into Unit 8 test. I'm just going to go to YouTube and I'm going to find a bunch of videos that cover the topics. I go, you could do that. And it could take a good long while, and it could not be exactly what your teacher is covering on Unit 8 test, or we could take your notes that you have from that unit and we could make an explainer video using something like Notebook LM that helps him really understand it and retain the information. That's way different than just trying to click and find and see resources that just might be blindly out there. But and
And I
then
know what, sorry, I just want to mention that I know that you said this, but I really wanted to emphasize also that it's what a lot of people really like about Notebook LM, again, is what Lindsay was saying, is that all of your own notes, all of the information your teacher gave you, even if you have additional research that you might have done, it uses that inventory of information. So it's not like you're just taking information from all over the web, or you're stealing information, or you're hitting the easy button. It's really, what you would be doing anyway in trying to organize the information, but it makes it so much more visual with flashcards or mind maps or slide decks or quizzes or audio. So I would really, infographics. I actually use this to help my son interview. He's in his 20s in New York, but he had a lot to learn. He had another job and he had a lot to learn about a lot of different companies. And so I just did a bunch of research and I put all that in there. And then he has ADHD and he loved just listening, watching the videos to get himself started. It was really a great initiation strategy for him because he wanted to learn about this company he was interviewing with next week. And so he watched a video and then, he would ask questions on a podcast, things like that. So it was really helpful.
in some other effective ways that we teach about how to study and that isn't doing the work for them and helps them with their critical thinking is if you think back to the study skills course, we teach about effective active studying. And one of the ways that we teach, and that I used to do way before AI and technology when I was working with students one-on-one, is we used to copy their notes and then hand white out the blanks to create a practice test. Because that's one of the most effective ways you can study, is to actually practice your recall and practice on a test and give yourself a testing environment. Like, don't look at the notes. And I will tell you that took a really long time. And I know a lot of, especially when students are studying at home, they don't have access to a copier. They might not even have whiteouts. Like, what are the barriers there to making a tool like this, where AI can help also make visuals? Because that was a barrier. The amount of times I tried to Google and find a blank European map that looked like the one that the teacher had given them, oh gosh, now
Yeah.
the amount of time it saved that. And this is an example of the forensics study guide that you see, and then we're going to need to label the mouth and the teeth there. And the student used AI to create multiple copies of that image so that they could practice their recall on something like this. And then to further even expand it, which is what we teach in the study skills course, and then the AI workshop actually helps them learn how to use AI to do some of these skills, is how can I make my active studying progressive? And so what I loved about this student is that they noticed that if there were too many white spaces, if there were too many blanks at the beginning of their studying plan, they would get overwhelmed and want to shut down and not really have the motivation to keep going. Because if I got 90% of the practice quiz wrong, that's going to feel really demotivating. So she was brilliant and came up with this scaffolded plan on her own of saying, I could ask AI to have 3 different versions of a practice test that progressively got more challenging or more difficult. So that's where you're using it to give you resources to still work on the same skills that the teacher wants you to do, that you're still building the knowledge and the understanding for the content, but you're using AI to help with the process piece. I love that. And then last one here before we're going to leave you with some scripts for how to talk to your kids about this. But we also just wanted to show how robust, this is an example of Claude. So if anyone's familiar with Claude, it's really, really great at creating images and interactive materials. And you do not need to know anything about technology. You just need to know how to type in a window. If you know how to type in the window like Google, then you could use a tool like Claude or NotebookLM or anything else. But this is an example of where I said, the student needs a geometry study guide. He really likes visuals, metaphors, and colors. Help me create an interactive study guide. And it came up with these great visuals that then they were able to practice with and study with. And it really helped it make the information stick in a way that worked for him. That was really cool.
Yeah, and another plug for Claude is that one of the things that I just did recently, and you're more than welcome to go to our website, on the summer page, we actually, oh no, maybe I can't remember if it's the where to start page or the summer page now that we put it, but it's a matcher. So if you know the challenge that your student is having and you don't know where to start at the Study Pro, Claude just created an interactive matcher. You can put in your student's grade, you can put in where you're seeing the challenges, and it will tell you, boy, I think starting with executive function coaching or the course might be the better thing. Of course, you can always call one of us, which we're happy to talk to you personally, but I think that was really, it was super easy to do, and I didn't have to do a thing in terms of coding. Anything else you wanted to share with that before I move over?
No, I thought, yeah, as we want to really just wrap up here with some examples of how, as I'm sure many of you are thinking, is okay, I might believe in these skills and the necessity of it, but when I bring it up with my student, there might be some resistance. So before we kind of walk you through the framework, I just want you to think about the last time that you did see resistance from your kids about whatever it might be. And I can imagine, I don't necessarily have to be a psychic to imagine how it sounded or looked like. And it might have looked like, I'm not going, I'm not doing that, that's stupid. Or it might have just been like passive resistance of like, oh, you always, right? Or, and then it might on your end then sounded like, tough luck, you're going, or tough luck, you're doing this, or I don't care, you got to do it. Or it might have looked like from your end that you might not have wanted to bring it up at all, or you just stopped. You just stopped asking, you stopped telling. It's exhausting as a parent to try to convince someone. When you see a benefit or when you see some kind of relief that it could be, and they seem to be actively resisting that, it can feel exhausting. So right before we switch to this next slide, I just wanted to see, just playfully, we all try our best. We're going to walk you through the kind of this 4-step framework. If anyone knows Dr. Becky or Rachel Bailey, they're parenting experts. They have amazing advice on how to script and talk to your kids. And I remember the first time I heard this, and I was thinking, oh, am I a 0 out of 4 for how I might have just tried to talk to this kid about something? So I want you to look at these 4 kind of step process for this framework, and then just maybe think about that last time. And so the first one we'll start with is validating. When they kind of meet with resistance, am I validating it? Validating, it does not mean agreeing. It does not mean I'm convincing. It just means I understand that that's how they're feeling. And then the second step would be to hold the boundary. I make that cringe face. I'd be like, okay, I might validate, but can I hold the boundary? We don't want to match their energy. We don't want to change the plan, because that's usually when the boundary moves, it's because we're responding to emotion. We're trying to, the discomfort from both them and then the discomfort that we feel from seeing them upset. That's when usually the boundary gets dropped or moved. And then the third step is the showing confidence, that I want to focus on their capacity, what they're capable of, what they've done before, not what their emotions or their discomforts are showing. Like, yeah, you can't raise your voice, no yelling. But, and then this last one of getting curious and problem solving. But it's very important that when we're staying curious, the key takeaway is I'm going to be working on problem solving with you about the experience, but not about the decision. The decision is made. I'm your parent. I'm here to keep you safe and secure. And my job as a parent is sometimes to do things that don't make you feel that great. So, but I am going to problem solve so that the experience doesn't have to feel as uncomfortable for you as you think it will right now. So now we're going to actually tell you a little bit like what it might sound like. I get you don't want to do this. It makes sense that you don't, that this might feel frustrating. I know this, any of those lines. And then when it's time to hold the boundary, it might sound something a little bit like this. We're still going to try this, right? Part of my job, I'm a mom, I'm a parent. It's about giving you a chance to try new experiences that could help. And then they're showing the confidence is, I know you can do this. Very simply, I know you can do this. I know you can try something new. I know even when it's difficult that I know you can still find a way to make it easier. And that's the last step, is what would make it easier. This is where they'll feel like they have a partner in you. This is where they'll feel heard. This is where they'll feel part of the process, is maybe just getting curious and asking them what questions they have. Are you curious about some of the details? Sometimes if they just find out like that it's only 2 hours, it's only 1 week, we have snacks, that it's, only 10 kids. Sometimes when they find out the details that you might know when you sign them up, but they don't know yet, that can relieve a lot of anxiety. And then you might give them some choices, like what would make it easier. If you ask what would make it easier and just open-ended, you're going to get a lot of, I don't know, nothing. So that's why we wanted to give you a couple options here. Would it make it easier if you went with a friend? So you could walk in with somebody you know? Would it make it easier if you're the one who picks the week? Is it easier in the morning or the afternoon? Just getting their input when making some of these decisions. That is the example of, I am troubleshooting your experience to help you feel part of the process, to feel understood, come over those barriers, but I'm not going to change the boundary, because if I change the boundary, even though it relieves that temporary discomfort, it's giving the signal to them that they're not capable of doing hard things, or that they shouldn't trust the decisions that you make as a parent, because if you made the decision, then I get upset and cry, or get upset, and then I change the expectation or the boundary, then that's giving a subtle that's signal to them that they're not really as capable. And so that's why we want to just focus on troubleshooting the experience for them.
And I want to share that there's kind of two paths, right? So if you've gotten to this place and you're here listening to this and you know that your child is resistant, like we hear from a lot of people, and we just heard it in the chat, there's really two paths to go down, right? The student can say, I don't want to go, because they are often embarrassed or ashamed. They feel that, I should be able to do this. I don't want to have to learn these other things. Maybe they think they're going to be bored. Maybe they think they're the only ones, and they don't see, they'll, even though they will feel a lot more confident when they come and they realize other people or other kids are there. So path one is, there's emotion. We change the boundary. We say, okay, next year will be different. Things will be okay. But as I said, we're just moving from the green to the blue to the black hills in skiing, right? What that means is that we're moving from easier to more challenging material. We're moving from an easier process of a red folder where everything moves from the left to the right, to a more challenging process where there's 6 teachers and 6 different sets of assignments and expectations. And so path one is we say, okay, we're going to kind of give in to the fact that maybe, even though I believe you need these skills, you're feeling resistant. On the other hand, path two is, as Lindsay was saying, validating the emotion. Yes, this feels uncomfortable. We're still going to try this because I know you can do things that are difficult. And so let's talk about some options. And I know what we know to be true is that what comes out of the other end is that they see they're not alone. They see that they have a lot of relief, because things that they don't know why were hard for them are not as hard anymore, and that other people find them hard too. And when we think about what do we really want the path, where do we really want the path to end, I think that's what we really like to leave everybody with. And so with that, we certainly want to open it up for other questions that you may have. Thank you, Adelita. She said she loves the ski analogy. My son loves skiing, so this will resonate. I'll need to show him this video. Please do. Also, please share when we can, which we will. But um, I really appreciate that. And these are the classes that we do have over the summer. We also do one-to-one coaching. We help with writing in math as well. So if you have kind of the summer assignments or concerned about summer slide, if you will, in terms of making sure we're prepared for next year, we certainly do that. It's also a great time over the summer to work on writing much more preferred topics without the kinds of deadlines, but really working on the process of writing for kids that are unsure. It's a great time to do that. And so if you do have any questions, we'd love to have them, you put them in the chat. And this is how you reach us. Both Lindsay and I answer the phones ourselves or answer your emails. So if you do have any questions, we'd really love to hear from you. But we did want to share, a sneak peek into the study skills, why it matters that it's a system, why it matters that we do it as a group so that kids don't feel alone, and why we think that those strategies stick. And so with that, we really appreciate all the people showing up on a Tuesday night at 7:30. And we're here at info@thestudypro.com. Should you have any questions at all. And with that, I think that's all for us this evening. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.